I used to watch this super hot reporter on TV and be like, man, like one day maybe I'll be able to be in a position to like, go talk to that woman. Like go be like, whatever.
And I was a TV reporter who did not imagine that one day I would fall in love with somebody who was in prison.
Yeah, so we both kind of defied expectations. I had no expectation whatsoever that I would ever meet this woman, no less like be in a house with her. But when we started talking on the phone, she interviewed me for a story back in 2019 about the abolition of parole, and I was just part of the story as one of the characters who had been sentenced to an excessive sentence, and because there was no parole, there was really no review. And I was like, wow, like she cares. Like she's a person who's interested, and I think that's really neat because she gives kind of a voice to the voiceless. Like people in prison, we didn't feel like we had a voice. So she shows up and she does this interview, and then
it was by phone. We didn't meet in person.
exactly. But she keeps accepting my calls. Like, so as all these things are going on, as they're strip searching children coming into visitation, as they're, not managing a scabies outbreak, or as they're not feeding people a proper diet, like she cares enough to answer and to like do a story. So like literally I get on the phone from prison where I feel completely powerless, call this super hot reporter, and next thing I know there's like a story on TV about what's happening, and she's interviewing people and like investigating the situation. And it made me feel amazing. And that was where I thought it was going to end. Like that's the extent of it, right? Like she's awesome, she's hot, but she's super successful. Like why would she want to even like talk to a guy in prison?
Well, I was not thinking romantically when I did those interviews. I had found him through social media. He had a Facebook page his mom maintained for him, and so I did think he'd be a great interview because he really illustrated the topic that I was reporting on. And then after we talked, we did 2 interviews by phone, and I thought he was smart, and I thought he really was a good interview, and he really did a good job sort of showing his perspective and shedding light on the issue. And then he just kept calling with more stories and more story ideas, not about him, but about other people in the prison and things that were going wrong. And so I was interested, had always been interested in criminal justice issues. So, and then the pandemic hit, and things really got bad in the prisons, and people were being transferred, and it was just a total disaster. So, so we had a reason to keep talking professionally, and we did that for. It was
6 months before you.
It was like it was close to a year.
Oh really?
Yeah, because I didn't leave. I left the summer after the story ran. I left in July. The story ran in August. So yeah, it's like a year later. I left. I left the station, and he had been calling me pretty regularly still, and I was like, I'm not going to be able to do any more stories. And then I had something come up in my personal life, really stressful situation that involved somebody I really loved, involved with the criminal justice system, and so I ended up feeling like he might have some really interesting perspective and might be able to help me as I thought through this stuff. But I said, I can't, I'm not, even if I go back to TV or I go back to a newspaper, I'm not going to be able to report on your case if we start talking about personal issues. And he was like, well, I want to be your friend. So we were friends at that point.
Yeah. Well, I mean, because there are a lot of reporters in the world. When I found somebody really amazing, that's different. And somebody asked what my reaction was upon getting my sentence. I pretty much shocked and numb and angry and self-pitying and lost. But it was the people like her, the people who like valued me and saw me as a person and like were open to experiencing me as a person, like seeing me not as just like a prisoner or somebody who'd done something terrible, or just was open to experiencing me as a person, that really gave me that hope. So that way, when we became friends, it was one of the most validating things, because I saw her as like so far outside of my league of like even a friend. She's like successful. She's this local like reporter who's done every kind of thing, and somehow, I don't know. Yeah, it was a bizarre experience, and I think that it really changed the dynamic. So that when we started getting really close and really intimate, when we started really connecting in a way that was clear that it was not just friendship. And it was so funny because when we were still friends and we were talking, she was like, how do you fall in love with a person in prison? Like, how do you know? Like, because you're just still talking on the phone.
It made no sense to me. I'm like, what's the difference between a friend and a girlfriend if you can never like see the person and yeah.
And I was like, oh, and she was like, yeah, that doesn't make any sense. And then a month after we started talking every day, she was like, Jesse, I'm in love with you, and I don't know what you're gonna do with it, but that's just where I'm at. And I was like, well, now you know.
Yeah.
Took you this long, but you figured it out.
And that was like 9 months after we had been friends, right? So we were friends, and then we started reading books, right? Because he was in this pandemic, and he's like alone, or not alone. You were anything but alone, but you were like in the
Felt isolated.
felt isolated in the middle of this dormitory, and he was really depressed, and I didn't, like I was like, what a horrible situation to be in. So we were like, we started by reading a book, right? And we talked about the book, and I was like, oh my God, this guy's really smart. Like maybe smarter than me.
She didn't say that to many people.
So yeah.
But it was this finding common experience in this wildly disparate experience, right? Like she's living in Charlotte. Well, I guess she's actually kind of in a prison herself because it's COVID and everybody's locked down and everybody's afraid to go out. But generally speaking, like she's free and successful and out in the world, and I'm in prison. But we found this incredible shared common experience. So we found these similar interests in CrossFit and certain topics and reading and kind of reporting and truth. And so what we found was like, I remember you said that you called equality being a reporter, and I called it being like a truth seeker, or like a spiritual seeker or something, like looking to the depth or the core of things, like being interested and being curious and being engaged. You're like, yeah, that's just being a reporter. So we had a lot in common despite how different our lives were. So it just kind of made sense. So when she told me she loved me, I was like, well, I think you're crazy, and I think that you don't understand. I have 10 years left on my prison sentence. Like, I don't think this is going to work, but like, yeah, I mean, that's how I feel. And I was actually more resistant to it than she was because I was like, you don't know what you're getting yourself into. Like, you fall in love with a guy in prison who can't be there, who can't support you, who can't be a partner. Like, I think it's a really bad idea. And she just kind of wore me down. I mean, I didn't stop calling. Don't get me wrong. I still called every day, repeatedly. But I just, in my mind, I didn't want to believe it'd work. I didn't want to invest my hope that we would be together, because I was afraid we would get hurt. I was afraid the situation would just be so bad. I mean, I don't know what would happen if I'd had to do all that time rather than getting out. But, Courtney, did you ever think that there was a chance you were getting manipulated or used?
Yes, I did. Because certainly I think that is, it's probably a risk in any relationship, but when you are, when you're in a relationship with somebody who is in prison and who you have actually never met in person, I think you have to like be aware that, and so but it wasn't what he said to me that convinced me. It was this long stretch of time that we were in touch, and the fact that he kept his word about like things like calling. I was like, man, I never had to wonder if he was going to call me at the time he said he was going to call me, or if he did, it was, he would get so anxious if he couldn't, if the phones were turned off or something. And so I got to see that. And then he started wanting me to meet other friends and people in his life. And we knew people in common. Weirdly, from Charlottesville, we had a lot of mutual acquaintances. So it wasn't just my assessment of him. It was a lot of other people who could say, oh my God, this guy is like really solid. He's really turned himself around. So I did have to there was a little bit of a leap of faith, but it wasn't just like blind faith.
Well, and we both had this weird moment of intersection because her podcast, Small Town Big Crime, is all about Jens Soring and the Haysom murders back in the 80s. And so she's like diving deep and looking for information. And I was with Jens Soring for years at Buckingham. Like we used to walk the track and talk about books and like interact. So she starts telling me this, and I'm like, is she just like pumping me for information? Is this all a setup? Does she just want like an inside track on Jens? And she was like, is this guy just Jens's like stooge?
When I realized you knew it, yeah, when I realized that like it's a big prison, I didn't necessarily think they had to know each other. But then it turns out, oh yeah.
Well, so I blew her mind as we started talking about like her podcast, and it was like, hey, I got something I want to show you. Like this will be funny. So I sent her a letter, and it takes like a week to get there. She opens it up, and it's a picture of me and Jens together, and she was like, what the? This is ridiculous.
That was ridiculous.
But that's one of the things that people don't realize. Like out here in the world, it's abnormal to say, yeah, I hang out with murderers and I hang out with this. In prison, you are going to be surrounded by people who have pasts and have done things that you may not like or may not accept, but you accept the people that are in front of you. You deal with people as they are, and we're all looking for friends or people we can trust or people we can talk to about certain things. And Jens was one of the smarter guys that I'd met. He was intelligent. He actually could talk about issues of humanity. We could talk about literature. Like I really valued that relationship at the time because I didn't have, I didn't get that from anywhere else. And he was incredibly fit. Like I remember being inspired by that because I hate running almost more than anything physical. I'll lift weights all day, I'll do burpees, but running sucks. And this guy would run like 6.5 minute miles, like nonstop around the track. And I remember being really blown away by that. So It's strange how you'll make friends and allies and people that you wouldn't ever talk to or know outside of prison. But at the same time, I don't know. Sometimes those relationships kind of fall by the wayside. Like you call them like archive relationships.
Yeah. Yeah, like friendships or relationships that you have at a certain point in your life that are incredibly intense, and maybe they are built around a shared experience you're going through. It could be school or a job or anything. And when that shared experience ends, you're still friends with the person. You're just not making as many memories. You're not. So it's like a friendship that's based on the past.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. But once we got over the idea of like being worried each other was like a plant from some weird part of our lives, I mean, we grew and we still didn't know. And we were really realistic about the fact that, yeah, our relationship works over the phone. But if I do get out, because again, there was still no guarantee I wasn't supposed to get out for 10 years. If I do get out, we would have to figure out like what that looked like. And we would have to say, hey, this may not work. So we had a video visit, which you can like pay extraordinary amounts of money to like see each other through a terrible old 1970s like TV
So
system.
bad.
And our first response to that video visit was not a good one. I was like, oh, this is not going to work. Like something about that was so awkward and so uncomfortable. And
Yeah, it was really bad.
it was terrible. And so we were like, well, if that happens when we meet in person, like this is going to be terrible. So we just need to we need to get through this. Like we need to go
Well, we
ahead.
came out of that and we were like, okay, I don't know, like we acknowledged how bad it was, how awkward it was. And then that, like by the next morning, it was sort of fine. Like we were
It was
like,
okay.
okay. Yeah, but there was a chance that the meeting in person was
Going to be terrible.
going to be terrible.
Because yeah, I mean, this is 2 years of knowing each other. This is 6 months of being in an intense relationship, but we didn't know what each other really looked like or felt like or smelled like or any of those things. You see pictures or I see her on TV, that's one thing, but being in person, that's a totally different dynamic. And you can have all the chemistry in the world over, over letters or over the phone and not have it in person. And I'm really thankful that we had it in person.
Me too.
So it worked out better than I think either of us expected. But then, I mean, you still have challenges because it's one thing to talk on the phone and you think, oh, well, getting out, now we have all the opportunities. But one of the things you expressed was, I got out and you were like, I miss talking to you on the phone. Like, I miss that intensity and that focus and that being the center of attention. And it was a different dynamic that we had to consider because being in person, being able to spend time together was amazing, but it also meant I was out in the world and things were busier and we didn't have an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours a day to just talk. Yeah, that was definitely a shift, and we still struggle with that. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard because we're both incredibly busy with like a ton of different things that can be stressful. And so just finding time and being in the right space to just like connect like we did for like an hour or 2 hours every day.
Yeah.
I think that was it was like the pandemic and being trapped at home for me and you
Being in prison.
and you being in prison. It's like the circumstances, I mean, nobody would want those circumstances to continue, but it did create kind of an unusual and really intense environment to bond.
yeah, because when you think about it, being able to be the center of somebody's attention, being able to be intensely connected to somebody emotionally, be able to talk and do a data dump and download everything and listen to somebody, that's incredibly intimate. You don't find that out in the world. You don't go on Tinder and have an amazing 17-hour conversation.
Spend
with
2
somebody.
hours every single day, right? Well, I mean, I guess people do. I mean, people
Maybe.
have the beginnings of relationships can be very intense, but yeah. But I think ours was just the pandemic made it more intense, and the circumstances you were in, it was very intense.
But I think at the same time, one of the things about our relationship that was so different for both of us, because you were hugely guarded. You hadn't been in a serious relationship for 20 years. I did in prison for almost 20 years. And I only was able to get into a relationship with you because I kind of snuck in the back door. Because you didn't think of me as somebody you would be romantically attracted to. You didn't think of me
He was
as...
a Trojan horse. He was a boyfriend Trojan horse.
Which,
a fiance.
I mean, I think is a positive thing because sometimes we have to have something get by our defenses. Because if it hadn't been for that, if I had come out and been like, hey, reporter lady, you're hot. You want to date? You would have been like, no, I'm good. Or you would have dated me 3 times and then left me like you did everybody else. But I think that allowing that in to build that intimacy and build that connection is really what let our relationship work. But it also, let's be honest, has created all kinds of problems. Because being alone in the world is really easy. Being in a relationship with people and being vulnerable and having all that stuff brought to the surface and having...
And living with somebody and yeah.
Oh my God. We were talking about that this morning. And I think that's the biggest thing, is that we're able to talk about anything. So we're able to talk about really uncomfortable moments. We're able to talk about what we like and what we don't like and the things we do to irritate. Like, we're able to have those conversations. And we just had a conversation earlier tonight where you were like super uncomfortable. You didn't tell me what was going on. And then you revealed something that had to be really vulnerable and really uncomfortable. And it was like, okay, cool. Like, I would rather you tell me than just like act like a crazy person, be all anxious. And I know that feeling because I'll be laying in bed sometimes and I know it's so much easier for me to just be like, hey, I'm in a really bad mood. I'm feeling crabby. As soon as I say that, it like takes the power away, right? Because if I just sit there and I'm just like, I'm crabby or I'm angry or whatever reason, it just makes it super awkward. And that the better alternative is always to just be like, hey, this is where I'm at. This is what it is. Whatever that is in a relationship. And I think that's a lesson we could learn, the whole idea of like radical honesty, which is it's not comfortable and it's not easy, but I think with practice we can learn to do that and be really successful.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not easy. It's not easy to say something that you aren't liking about yourself in that moment. It's like, it's not a reaction I want to be having, or this is not how I want to be, but this is how I am right now.
Well, and it's all the feelings. It's, there are issues of like jealousy in different situations or concern or, I mean, she was out in the world and like sometimes she'll talk about somebody that she used to date. And I'm like, I get really jealous. I don't have any reason to. Like, she's incredibly loving and intimate. She made it entirely clear she doesn't want anybody but me. But that comes up and I have to deal with that. And I have to say, hey, I'm really struggling or I'm really jealous or I don't know what I'm going to do. But just verbalizing that rather than like holding it inside or feeling like I need to have shame around what I'm feeling or who I am has been really profound. And doing that in person is really easy. Like when I'm teaching a program in prison, I don't give a crap what anybody thinks about me because what are they going to think about me? But when you're in a relationship with somebody you care about and you care what they think about you and you want them to love you and you want them to accept you, it can create all this pressure. So in a weird way, learning the patterns I learned in prison of like just not caring what people thought about me and kind of doing the next right thing and being open and honest and vulnerable and trying to teach other people inform the way I do in this relationship. Because a lot of times I have to just kind of like hold my breath and go in and be like, I'm really jealous. I'm really angry. And just do it before I have time to think about it and become self-conscious about it.
You're good at that.
I'm trying.
He's actually making me better at that because, yeah, I don't do great talking about my negative emotions. In fact, it usually takes me a while to even realize what the negative emotion I'm having is. It's like something feels off.
Well, I notice it. I'm like, honey, are you okay? You're like, yeah, I'm fine. Things are great. I'm like, honey, I'm not going for that. Like, we need to talk about this. What's going on? But again, I mean, I feel like that was one of the benefits of being in prison for all those years, is I feel like I read people really well. I feel like I can walk into a room and I can kind of get a feel of what's going on or who somebody is and that's been really helpful in a lot of ways because I can kind of read through people's BS, or I feel like I can. Maybe I'm just getting snowed. And I can tell who somebody really is and who's being genuine, who's being vulnerable. And that's one of my biggest things out in the world is people are so full of crap. Like everybody's, has this kind of facade. People have this really like meaningless kind of talk while meaning something else underneath or thinking something else underneath. So when I meet genuine people, like I saw Eze at Common House too. Came over and I was like, I really like this guy. Like I started telling Isabella, I was like, I really like this guy, like you should talk to him. There's something about him that is just genuine, engaging, and real. And when I find those people, I'm like immediately drawn to them. I'm like, hey, I want to hang out with this person. Like I want this person to be my friend because they're real in a world full of people that are like probably just insecure and like putting on facades. But it has definitely helped with the friendships and the relationships that I value. And it has really helped me connect to her because she is as real as I come.
Mm-hmm. He's pretty real too.
I am a meat popsicle. But, and she does this amazing work. I'm getting these opportunities, like I'm going to speak in San Francisco next week. I'm going to Boston to speak after that. I may be going to speak to like a military unit, which is the last thing I ever expected to do. But you have like your podcast, and you have investigative reporting, and you have these great things. So check out Small Town Big Crime. They've got a YouTube channel, and it's a podcast available everywhere. They have done incredible investigation that's basically deeper and more significant than what the entire like police or sheriff's department of this entire area has done about a case. That's the other thing that's so interesting. You've always been interested in criminal justice reform, but you've almost always been on the side of kind of like catching or punishing perpetrators rather than like falling in love with the prisoner.
I really do enjoy doing true crime reporting. I mean, I definitely want to get justice for victims, and I want people who commit hideous crimes to be held accountable. I still think that the criminal justice system needs to be reformed, but I don't want somebody who's a murderer or a kidnapper or a sexual assailant to be out walking around committing more crimes. So I would say, and I also, I mean, I really do like sort of the investigation and the mystery piece of it. And I have also done reporting on wrongful convictions. So I'm interested in all the pieces of criminal justice stuff.
So one of my favorite stories about you is when she was a little kid, she would be in one room, hear the phone ring, and then like pick the phone up, get the receiver just so she could listen and like listen to other people's conversations. And that is a reporter is what she wants to do. She wants to be listening and know what's going on behind every scene. And I love that.
They
about
don't
her.
tap phones.
But so she like is so engaged. She'll just wake up in the morning and she'll be okay, and then she'll suddenly have this like manic glee. And I'll be like, "What's going on, honey?" She's like, "I got a tip. I'm on the case," and she'll be reporting on whatever. And it's so fun to see because I think we all have that like childlike curiosity and drive and wonder. And for you, it comes out in reporting. It comes out in getting to tell stories and like highlight what's going on.
Yeah.
And I love seeing that in you because I love that in me, but it's hard to tap into that. Like I get super serious. I get super like, oh, nonprofit, like meetings, like scheduling, like I don't want to do that. I want to go out and be a kid. I want to go be free. And that's why I have a motorcycle, because motorcycles let everybody be free. But yet there's something about that I really admire about you and that I really would like to emulate in my own life.
Well, I think we do balance each. I mean, you can be. He can be very, very funny. He's got a great sense of humor, but you also do have you have a very serious streak, like a serious core. So he does need to be nudged out of that from time to time.
How am I the one person to come out of prison as a most normal guy?
I ask that myself all the time.
I don't think I am normal. I think that I have been incredibly fortunate to have a perfect array of support and resources and opportunities that most people don't have. I think that I came from a situation that taught me resiliency that I think is often absent in our society. I had to like fight through some really difficult things. I had to fight through some periods of hopelessness. I had to fight through like horrible depression. I had to fight through like really dark moments. And what that gave me was kind of a strength and a conviction and a direction moving forward that I can always do that. And I was so grateful for all the people who inspired me and said things like, there's no such thing as standing still in life. Like if you're standing still, you're moving backwards because life is always moving. So I have these ideas and I have this drive and this inclination because people taught me and inspired me and guided me. And like people in prison as well as people on the outside. And I think if more people had those opportunities and more people had, the kind of drive and interest as well as the belief in themselves. Because that was, I think, the biggest thing for me is in those moments that I felt hopeless, people didn't say, oh, you just need to do better or, whatever. People were like, no, like, we know you can do this. We believe in you. Like, we'll help you get there or let us show you how you can get there. So there was this sense of like empowerment and hope that I had that most people never experienced, that I had never really experienced up to that point. So in a weird way, that was like the best thing to happen to me by finding people who loved me and encouraged me and empowered me. Plus, I did a lot of work. Because sitting there with so much time and so much opportunity, I just wanted to be prepared. Courtney, did you realize just how smart and incredible Jesse is before you met him face to face?
Yes, that's why I fell in love with him. So I knew he was. I mean, when I first interviewed him, I had read he had a lot of writing already online, so I knew he could write, and I thought that was why I reached out to him because I was like, this is a really verbal guy, and he's clearly thought a lot about this topic, and he's going to be a great interview. And sure enough, he was. And so I came away from the interview thinking that's a really smart guy. But I didn't think more of it than that because I interview lots of people for lots of stories. But then as we continued to talk, that feeling persisted. And then as we were talking earlier about the transition when I left the TV station and I had sort of a crisis in my personal life, and I thought that Jesse would have particular perspective on it. And we decided to become friends and I wouldn't report on him anymore. At that point, I started to see sort of a whole other side of him as I started to share more stuff personally. And then we started reading books and discussing books. And then we started talking about like our personal interests. And then we were like working out in the morning together. Like we would get up and do burpees. And we had like all these weird things in common. We had a really similar worldview. And so, yeah, I mean, I was completely in love with him and people thought I was crazy. But I was like, this guy is incredible.
I said, you must have felt like you're crazy. You're falling in love with a guy who has however many more years, 10 more years in prison.
I did, and my family. My friends, I think, were all sort of, my friends were they were kind of okay with it. They were like, you do you. And, I'd get him on speaker and he'd talk to my friends, but my parents were like, not okay with this at all. And they were like, don't send him any money. And I was like, he just actually, sent me a gift certificate for a massage from prison.
Yeah. Well, 'cause, I mean, I think there are a lot of guys in prison that are running game or trying to survive or trying to get off on somebody. Um, and it was important to me not just to not be that person, but to show up in the ways that I could. So when I was able to, I have a really good friend. I actually walk with her every Thursday morning, who's a massage therapist and who's really talented. And I was like, hey, like I want to do something special for you. Like I want you to know how much you mean to me. So I managed to arrange getting her a massage, and that was really important to me. That meant a lot that I could do that. And it was just, again, good fortune that I was in a position to have any money at all, and especially to have money to do something like that. So when I was able to show up for you, that was like one of the reasons it was so important for me that you meet my friends, was that I couldn't be there. And I wanted you to have some connection and support and interaction that I couldn't provide. Um, yeah, it was a way that I could reach out. And that was one of the things that I love about my family and friends, was the ability to show up for each other. Like to know that if you need something, I can be there. Or like if your son needs something, I could be like, whatever that is, I want to have the relationship that is about more than just like you and I in a transactional way, but like meaningfully showing up in people's lives. And that was the only way I could do it, by sending you a massage and introducing you to my friends.
Yeah. I mean, there was something so poignant and moving to me about he was every day, like trying to do the right thing, trying to be the best person he could be, and trying to show up not just for me, but for his friends and for his family. And it's not something that you can fake over like a decade, without anybody catching on. And I just saw that and I thought it was extraordinary.
One of the best things that anybody ever told me was, you have to do the next right thing. You can't control the outcome, you can't control the direction, but you can do the next right thing. And that really informed my kind of position moving forward, because I recognized I don't know whether I'm getting out of prison. I don't know whether I'm going to make a difference in somebody's life when I'm teaching this yoga class or this nonviolent communication and these DBT skills, but that's the next right thing. Like I feel it in my core and I can show up and I can do it. And whether it works or not is really beyond me. Because I was talking to somebody tonight who works at the juvenile facility and is just heartbroken because she says, I can't lose one more student. Like I cannot lose one more kid. And like they're shooting and they're dying. And I'm done with this. And I said, look, all you can do is cast seeds. And it's really hard to recognize that. Like I struggled with the idea that I couldn't do everything. I struggled with the idea that I couldn't like save everybody. But what I had to recognize was the humility that I can't do but what I can do. And I can cast all these seeds in the world and I can really hope that somebody takes root, but that's not up to me. That I can give somebody what I think is a helpful perspective or a tool or an idea, but it's up to them to take that step. And once I recognized that, it was actually allowed me to be kind of a better person and more help to more people, because I no longer was like trying to go in and like save things and like, no, you're gonna make different decisions. It was I could show up for people, I could hopefully give them an example or model healthy behavior, and then if they were interested, I could share with them my perspective, and it's been really gratifying. I had somebody send me an email a couple weeks ago, and this is a person that I regularly correspond with, and they said, hey, so-and-so is in my pod, wanted you to know, you said something 4 years ago, and it meant so much, and he said, that's really kind of defined who I am moving forward. And I don't remember the specific thing I said, like I know when he said it, it's something that I used to say a lot, but it's like the fact that I said something because I knew there was some small hope that it would have an impact. And here 4 years later, I'm getting the message that it did, that it had an impact on somebody and it's changed their life. Like that's how I try to live. What do I think would help create a higher rate of success for people once they get released? I think there are a lot of things, but I look at what I had and the experiences I had, and I think we could recreate that. So if we could give people support, if we could have staff that was believing in them and empowering them and essentially pushing them in a positive direction, we can't give everybody family and friends, but we can give them staff that believe in that. And the model is to empower people.
Access to education, if you had.
Yeah. Give people access to education. There's a 5-to-1 ROI in education, dollar-wise. Yeah, and I basically came out rehabilitated because I had access to education, access to mental health care, support and friends and family, and people who encourage, like, I never imagined I would write an essay that would get published. I never imagined I would, like, have a voice and be able to speak and do things. I think that it was a perfect combination of, like, kind of the right, just, like, core experience and hope. and then the right opportunities. And I don't think that everybody getting out of prison with these resources would necessarily be like me, but I think we would have a lot more success stories if we gave people the same resources and support and opportunities, and then especially transitional support, because you can be the best person in the world. And this is what we're talking about in the juvenile facility. These guys get on board, they're doing art classes, they're doing therapy, they're doing everything, and they go right back to the neighborhood where the gangs and the politics and the issues they're dealing with drive them right back into their old life. Where they're like, hey, I don't want to, but I have to carry a gun. Like, my house is full of bullet holes. What do you want me to do? So until we start giving people a different start, we give them transitional housing in a different neighborhood, we move them to a different city, we give them some way to start in an environment that isn't as toxic and damaging as the environment they came from, it's not going to change no matter what we do on the inside. So that's why I really want to start a halfway house. I really want to have transitional housing. I really want to have something that allows people to have a fresh start on the street, because far too often they go back to the very same environment that led them to prison in the first place.
Yeah.
All right, well, we've been doing this for a while. Thank you, everybody, for watching. We just wanted to kind of check in and talk about it, and I hope everybody has a wonderful evening. It's a weekend, so have fun. It's going to be beautiful here in Virginia, and hopefully it is everywhere else. Take care.
Good night.